what I did on the early stages was try and take in too much advice and not be clear about my strategy and where I wanted to be. And that sort of slowed me down many years at the early stages by just trying to please other people, including building up a board and a set of senior team. But if you have a vision, if you have belief, as a leader, you have to strive to achieve that. And actually what I found over time, very early stages, but people will follow you if they believe in you.
From Coordinate Sport, it's the Drive Phase podcast, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. I'm James Moore, and our guest on this episode is Dean Horridge. Dean has spent more than 3 decades in sport and education, first as a PE teacher, then building successful businesses and helping to transform perceptions about the industry. He's the founder of Fit for Sport, the UK's leading children's activity provider, and a former chairman of UK Active Kids. Earlier this month, Dean launched the Social Book Company, designed to support children and educate them about the many challenges they face growing up today. During the episode, Dean talks us through the origin of Fit for Sport, how he grew the business to impact over 100,000 children every year and employ 650 staff. And after 29 years in charge, how the business was last year acquired by the Australian-based Junior Adventure Group. We hear about his thoughts on the industry as a whole and how we can solve the childhood obesity epidemic in the UK. So get a pen and paper ready and take some notes from a pioneer and one of the entrepreneurs that have helped to build the sector we have today. Dean, great to have you on today. I just wanted to kick off with the backstory, really. So, on my notes, I've written down born and raised in East London, and I guess you might want to fill in the story from there.
Well, exactly, yeah. It seems a long time ago, but born and raised in East London, originally sort of Whitechapel area, which is an area called Chicksown Estate, which was, a typical, community-based council-run facility where we got up to mischief and a little clap around the head with dad and mum occasionally to keep us in track. But it was a typical sort of council estate where, we had great fun times as a child, going to some localised schooling. And then when I was about sort of 11, we moved into Hackney, so Hackney Road, actually, so near Shoreditch area, which is very different to when I was...
I was going to say, is it different now to what it was back then?
You can't recognise it. It's full of trendy bars and restaurants. So, very different place to when I was there. But two great areas, a lot of fun as a child, a lot of... areas to get up to mischief and just do what children love to do, which is a lot of times we're just trying to stop children doing today, which is climbing trees and climbing walls and running around on disused railway bridges.
Exactly. I know you mentioned your parents there. Were they kind of not disciplinarians, or do they encourage you to get out and get active? Or?
Yeah, I was the last of 6. So I come from a family of 6. I was the last of 6. So my sort of being the last of the runt, sort of, they've been there, done it. It's almost an inconvenience sometimes, the last one. You've been through all the pitfalls of the other children. And
so you got away with murder then, yeah?
I got away with murder, but it was more my sort of elder brother and sisters keeping me in track most of the time. So, yeah, it was a fun time, but there was always someone watching over my shoulder, making sure we had the right journey. And I guess, as I do say, a lot of times it's the options and the opportunities you make out of life. That could have been a very different place. My environment now, coming from an area like that with a lot of my close friends, some are dead, unfortunately, some are not on a good road, but you make the right decisions and everybody has a choice to end up where they want to go if you have the passion and desire.
Yeah, and I looking at your story, obviously, I think sport probably played a big part in that. I guess that's, for a lot of people who've been successful, I guess at early age, sport, the discipline that comes with sport might have impacted your kind of trajectory as you came up, do you think? Or?
Very much so, very much so. I was very lucky when we moved. I was always, as I said, always very competitive, being the last of 6. I hated losing and still do today. I have 3 young children who've never beaten me at anything. And long may that continue. But it's a very competitive nature of mine. And I played tennis with my elder brothers from sort of the age of 10 and very quickly picked up the game and started to beat them and got beat up for it. But I love beating my brothers at it. And I very luckily got spotted by a gentleman walking past a tennis court, actually, on Hackney Road that we cut a hole in the fence and was able to use free of charge. And he said, who'd you play for and what club? And I says, well, I don't. I've never been to a club. He said, well, you have talent, come to my club. up the road called Haggiston. I never went because I thought you had to pay and we didn't really have any money. And he came back 2 weeks later and said to me, where were you? Why haven't you turned up? And I said, well, actually, I don't have any money. And he's like, I didn't ask you to pay. So cut a long story short, he took me under his wing and coached me. And I went on a sort of a great tennis junior program with him and won every tournament for 2 years, including what they had as a sort of I guess, the UK London Boys Federation Tennis Cup at Queen's. So I had a great career sort of playing tennis, and I still play to date. But I unfortunately went for a run and completely busted my ligaments. So it put me out for tennis for 2 years. And at that stage, all these people you were beating me very easily. So it was that time where I thought, I need to do something different.
The competitive nature took over.
Exactly.
Just, on that with tennis, I know we're probably going off a little bit. I know there's been a bit of controversy recently around like state of tennis, GB wise, and people coming up. Do you think I guess it always has that stigma. I'm going to get into that around kids getting involved in sport, but tennis always kind of carries that stigma of a bit of an elitist sport, do you think? And a bit, well, like you said, you had that view of I'm going to have to pay to go. So
yeah, exactly. And let's not pretend it's not. Tennis is an elite sport still in this country, and despite the hard work of the LTA and hopefully the new CEO, Scott Lloyd, really sort of pushing that forward, you have to get to grassroots level. The talent is in grassroots level. I barely picked up a racket. In fact, I won my first tournament purely for the fact there were 6 Wilson rackets on order for the winner. And I thought, I've got to have these. This is amazing, because I knew I could keep one and sell 5.
So even 5, yeah.
So I won the tournament out of pure grit and determination, not out of talent. But it shows your desire, I guess, of those those children who potentially don't get the opportunity in a sport like tennis. And it's really our job, and which is why I sort of created, I guess, Fit for Sport in the first place, of making sure that we do give the opportunity to all children. It was very passionate of mine to, give back what I was given as a child, which was a chance in life. And I made the most of it, which is why I'm here today in a position that I'm in. But, there's a lot of children out there that have huge talent and just don't get the opportunity through the barriers of finances or the elite sport and stigmatism with someone coming from a council estate.
The last thing, before we move on to, and you touched on Fit for Sport and the reasons for launching, but the last thing on kind of school days is obviously really competitive, obviously really talented in sport. In terms of academia, how was that for you? Did you enjoy school, and how was your experience coming up? And
I was untapped talent, I always say it, in my schooling days. Purely for one, I was a little bit mischievous and not always the best behaved, being the last of 6. And then, I got spotted very late in schooling, pretty much my last year, that I had dyslexia. So you can only imagine my my French teacher asking me to stand up and read some French out, and pronounce French words to a class and barely understanding and reading the English language. So I was always at middle of the table, top third of results, but struggled purely because of the dyslexia I have now, which never held me back, but has always got in my way, I guess, understanding the school curriculum.
I guess that's obviously helped you to think around problems, I guess, and look at things from a different angle, I suppose, in business as well. Absolutely. And,
I think it's really taught me from a very early age there's obstacles, and the obstacles are there to get over, despite what they are. And that's my philosophy in life. You deal with what's been dealt in front of you, and you can either walk backwards and say, oh, that looks too high, or you say, right, give me a leg up and let's get over it.
So moving on towards business, obviously you've already said, I guess, was that your first venture, the sale of the 5 rackets?
Exactly. My dad was the probably world's worst entrepreneur. He had many businesses starting and failing at short term, great ideas, and he always had, as I say, finger in the pies. And I always was intrigued to see what he was doing around his different businesses and help out. And he actually, big business was he opened up a factory making furniture and polishing furniture, and did it quite successful for many years. And actually, my brothers continue that to date. But I realized very early on that was a very dirty, dusty job, that I was the best sweeper-upper and got promoted after 2 weeks, but it wasn't for me.
No.
There was something better and bigger out there. So I did that for a very short period of time before realizing I couldn't play tennis at the ability, but I've always loved working with the children and giving something back regarding coaching to them. So maybe that was my calling in life, to start working with some younger children in and around sports.
And then did that lead you into PE teaching? And
yeah, so I got qualified in tennis and squash, actually, because I realized cleverly that tennis really is that sort of summer period game, and I wouldn't have much money in the winter. So what could I do? So I actually got coached and qualified in both sports, and quickly built up a reputation for engaging children in those sports in different working environments, and got then a great job as head pro at the Hurlingham Club in Putney, the Cumberland Club, and also the Broadgate Club. And very uniquely, I never worked for any of those. I became self-employed, which they hated. But my passion was engaging the children in those settings. And, clubs like Hurlingham Club, we talked about earlier, the elite, they asked me to come in and get the kids engaged in the sport, but try and put them in a position where they wasn't heard or seen. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. These are your future members. Like, what are you talking about? So we was the loudest and engaged bunch of children. We went from 8 kids in a squash section to 120 within 6 months, purely because it was fun. Purely because I engaged the children, purely for the fact that the kids wanted to come back every week and have a laugh doing what they're doing, as well as learning the sport. So that's what where my journey started on that was very much engaging the children in those settings and bringing them on a journey which I do today, just make sure that actually you engage all children in a fun environment. It's very simple.
Definitely. So moving on from there, became head of PE.
I did, yeah, very by fluke actually. It was a school in Kensington. Heard about some of the work I was doing in actually Kensington Sports Centre, which, as you probably know, was in the middle of Grenfell Estate, and they had a lot of children around throwing bottles and bricks through their windows on a daily basis. And I sort of went there for an assessment. I says, why? Because you're not engaging the children. These children see this place as an obstacle, and their way of having fun is to put a brick for your window. So they tasked me with trying to engage the children, and I very quickly started a sort of a holiday provision there and engaged 80 of the local, what they call vandalism kids in the estates. And we had an amazing summer of engaging, and surprise, surprise, they never had anybody putting a brick through the window or trying to set fire to the back door in those periods. So a local teacher heard about some of the work we did, because we got picked up in the press, and asked me to come and assess their school in Kensington, South Kensington, which I did. And they said, we can't understand. We've got 128 children, and a lot of them don't like taking part in sports and activities. It was very obvious to me the reason they didn't like to take part in sports and activities or sports or PE was the fact that the teachers didn't want to teach it. And they had no interest in teaching this subject. They had no desire to deliver a quality, engaging session. And the thing they wanted to do was put their books in front of them and mark them while the kids run around having a fight. So I said I'll help them out for a few weeks. And 8 years later, I had a team of 3, and I was head of PE, which is my dream job. And if I had a choice tomorrow, I'll do the same.
Go back to it.
I loved it. I just loved being with the kids, and just having that opportunity to really inspire those young children for a future and adulthood life, which is enjoying being active.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, missed quite a lot in terms of that literacy point, that physical literacy point of view, where if you can, similar to your new project as well, but I guess if you never learn to read, or you never learn to use your body properly, you're not going to want to be active or participate in sport long term into your future. So
absolutely, we get it. Unfortunately, we get it fundamentally wrong in this country, and many other countries as well. I do a lot of work in India and China and Canada, but we get one chance to engage children, and if you get it wrong, it stays with you for life. If you ask anybody who's middle-aged or someone in their 50s, do you remember the time in PE, your first experience? You either loved it because you was good at sport, and naturally those 10 in every 30 children in a class are good at sports. I was lucky, I was one of them. They're good at sports naturally. They'll do the ones after school club, and they'll play for teams at the weekend, etc. But there's 20 in every class that are not very good. And if you don't engage them in an environment like PE with fun, engaging activities that actually all can do and accomplish and feel self-worth and, want to come and do it again, you lose them for life. And you never, ever remember your best and worst teacher. And unfortunately, a lot of our worst teachers that I meet, people across the world are from that PE experience, where if a teacher asks you to run around the playground, we know who's going to come first, second, and third, but we know who's going to come last, second from last, third from last, every single time we ask them to do the same thing every week. And they wonder why these children don't turn up to the lessons, and we'll wonder why they don't want to do them again. And it's not rocket science. Have teams, forget the races, forget that running around playground. It's not fun. Have a game of tag. have a game, tag to warm up the children, have some relays and balance it out. And you'll then find that the quicker kids are actually asking the slower kids to go, 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 because it's then a team environment. Exactly. So, we've got to get on that mindset, and we lose a lot of children, unfortunately, through that PE experience.
One thing was I wanted to get to the bottom of the kind of Ian Wright story. He's a massive idol of mine. So I think I remember seeing, actually do vividly remember the show was it on Channel 4?
Yeah, Channel 4, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and I've got some memories of that, and I don't know whether that inspired me to get into the industry. But before we get into that, if I can take you back to 1991,
yeah,
head of PE now, and I guess it's crazy, like similarities to today, really. Like you saw the kids coming back from the summer break and maybe not being as fit as they should be. But I mean, now we've got the whole nation being locked down for such a long period, and they're all coming back to school now. So it's kind of, I guess, come full circle 30 years later.
It has, unfortunately, yeah. And it's probably going to be even worse now. Yeah, it was. As a head of PE, our children coming back September, me just realising very quickly early on, what on earth have these children been doing over summer? And did some research and some focus work with parents, and realising actually nothing. Parents thought it was a time for rest and a time for inactivity. But, I don't know about you, 7 weeks off doing nothing doesn't do much for your fitness levels. And so I said, well, that's not good enough. There's a lot of children not doing anything at weekends and after school, and certainly in the holidays. So I started a company called Fit for Sport, which was always a passion to get children fit to play sport. That was the ethos of the early days of the engagement. And very quickly started a Saturday morning session that had 2 kids. And week 3, it had 40 kids in a 3-month waiting list. So I knew very quickly there was a market for it. And I just, expanded on that, had more clubs, hired more coaches, and very realized that this was a niche in the market. And those days, there wasn't a lot of, pretty much no providers around offering this sort of service. And very quickly, it expanded to something where I had to make a decision whether I wanted to, have the salary of a head of PE, which,
security,
is okay, or take a chance on upper end of the business, which had in those days a potential to really expand very quickly. So I resigned as a head of PE reluctantly and started the journey to Fit for Sport.
Obviously, it must have been, I'm looking at the first milestones, and you kind of answered that question already in terms of a couple of kids the first week, and then rapidly growing to 40 plus waiting list, extra long waiting list. How did you go about? I mean, did you have a business plan? Did you know, right, we're going to expand this way? This is the strategy, or was it kind of fly by seat of your pants a bit? I don't know. Everyone kind of
Good question. But at the early days, it wasn't really about a business plan. It was around thinking, how am I going to cope with a bigger issue, which a lot of your listeners and potential small business owners would have, which is when Mr. Dean is not there, is the quality and enthusiasm and the values and the professionalism and the desire, et cetera, still remain. And that's the biggest challenge of our sector, is making sure that in those days, who and where is there another Mr. Dean? Because when I wasn't there the early days, my 40 went to 14. And I very quickly realized that we're only as ever good as the last coach with the last child in our setting, which hasn't changed to date. And so therefore, it was my job to come up with a training and support program for inducting and engaging those staff and supporting them on a journey to be able to deliver the high quality, but more importantly, the engaging environment for the children, where actually the children had no idea they've just run 2 miles in an hour and a half session. They just thought they're playing games and having fun. And that's the key to success, is the children are very simple. They want to do things, they have fun. And unfortunately, I had a lot of coaches in the early days who thought that it was a good idea to talk 20 minutes about a technique. And I quickly realized, no. I couldn't give a damn how this child is holding a hockey stick or, a uni-hock stick. Just get them running around the cone with a ball as many times as they can and high-five them.
Yeah, need to be active. Yeah.
And there's a big difference. They'll feel, they've achieved something. You spend 20 minutes talking about a technique of how to hold a stick. Half the session's gone. You lost half the class, and only, 20% are going to be able to do it properly anyway, wasting your time.
So that induction, I guess that was your kind of setting those standards, those operating standards, and inducting the staff.
Yeah, exactly. So I came up with some values, actually, which is, James, the values in the company still remain today. So the values I installed in the company, I tried not to employ people who didn't portray those values. And they're values like professionalism and, being able to be a role model, have fun. Most important thing, the staff has to have fun themselves. If you're laughing and running around like an absolute fool, the kids love it, but they'll do the same. Yeah. And you have to be professional. You have to live, lead a healthy lifestyle. And most importantly, people have to trust you. Children, you get one chance with children. If they don't trust you, you've lost them. But that comes in many aspects, because you also have parents. Don't forget, in this sector, somebody goes online and books their child, which is the most precious thing in the world as far as I'm concerned, and many parents, and they leave them with a complete stranger, sometimes for full daycare. Yeah, and that's sometimes overlooked, of the trust that parents have to put into our sector and our staff and our employees that we employ to deliver childcare, sports or other to these children. It can't be underestimated. You're leaving your precious gem with somebody you actually have no idea what they're going to do.
And I guess, I suppose two questions on the back of that. One would be running the business day to day. So 29 years of running the business day to day. Did you have, and it might be what you've already touched on, but did you have any kind of recurring challenges that always came up? And I know you'd probably be staff, I guess, but maybe something else that always came up, and kind of how did you deal with those as you grew?
Yeah, I mean, staff, any operational business, staff is always the number one bigger challenge. And then, later in life, I guess, is cash flow. When you're growing so quick as I did, cash flow was always quite a big issue. But a lot of the areas that we've come a long way from, I guess, when I started to now, are systems. We have many small operators now having to rent a booking system, an online booking system. When I started, it was checks. I don't even know those, James. Checks used to be written.
Do you know what? I actually, when I found out you actually got charged by the bank to deposit checks, that was like an eye opener for me.
Exactly.
I didn't realize, yeah.
Exactly. So it was a lot of admin required outside the contents of actually running and delivering a business. And at the early days, as any business owner knows, you have to work 7 days a week. You have to do everything yourself. You have to put in the hours to be successful. And I suppose the biggest challenge was really having a point in time where there was no more hours in the day that I could give. And so I had to think, well, how do I build up a team around me to support me, whether that's operational, whether that's accounts. And of course, what comes with that is a cost. So you have to be thinking about, well, how much can I grow, or how much can I save of my time to build the business if I bring in someone to take that off my hands? So, you've got to be very clever. Right? Yeah, exactly. You've got to be very clever about the way you approach that. And it's always a very big decision for many people in taking that next step. But my advice is, what you never know until you've tried. So do it.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of just touching on cash flow there, have you ever took any kind of outside investment, or have you looked at quite a large business when you grew?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were pretty much the largest, by far at the end. I had something like 650 staff. And foolishly, I never borrowed a penny. Would I do it again? Never. If you see how many nights I've had, walking up and down my house thinking, cracky, this is on the line. So hindsight, I would definitely look for some investment to make that opportunity for growth a little bit easier. But no, I didn't take any investment till very late, when we were sort of looking at the sale and the acquisition side of, I guess, moving Fit for Sport to the next level. So, and the banks were always very supportive, because obviously I had a track record, and I think I was very open and transparent always with my position with the business. So it was, we made money to grow. And I think that's the way I did it. But I do it a little bit different these days with my new businesses.
Interesting. You said you had 650 plus staff.
Yeah.
No, it's not a franchise operation, is it?
No, I mean, and a lot of people have always said to me, why on earth would you not take the market share of the franchise? I tried franchise, and I spent a lot of money having a franchise model, and we still have it to date, with all the lawyers and putting these wonderful franchise packs and agreements in place. And I tried it, and I didn't like it. I've just never been a big fan of franchise. I think you lose a little bit of control, a little bit of quality. And unless you have people so passionate and believing in what you want to deliver with the values, I go back to my values, it doesn't work for me. And, it works very well for some other providers out there, but I just didn't sleep well at night thinking that we were a franchise. I like the ownership factor.
Well, your model, yeah, totally understand. That probably leads me on to one of the things where, what are the kind of myths in the sports industry, or the kind of misconceptions that really kind of, this is sports coaching industry specific, really kind of push your buttons, maybe the stereotypes that get put onto providers or to organisations?
Yeah, don't get me started.
I'll set you off now, and then we'll...
my biggest issue is that this sector, and I hope it's changing a little bit now with the work I did as chair of UK Active Kids, but the sector's seen as just a sports coach scenario. White man van comes around a lot. You hear a lot of people that work with government saying, "Oh, this industry is full of white man van people with bag of balls and whatever," and it is. But what really frustrates me is do people look down on the profession and think it's unprofessionalized and that they don't have qualified people and it's just someone who doesn't have a lot of qualifications that is a sports coach. And it's totally on the reverse. If I've employed people over the years on so many degrees coming out their ears, it's a hugely impressive industry with multi-talented people. And my frustration is it's not recognized yet as true fact of a profession which supports millions of children and changes lives. And that's got to change. And the work that SIMSPA's doing at the moment, I've been working with SIMSPA for many years, they're going to hopefully really move that sector forward with a recognized qualification, minimum standards. But we have to have a sector actually need to work better together, James. We are so segmented and there's not so much collaborative work, especially alongside government, yet we play the biggest impact. If you looked at 87% of schools use an external provider.
I didn't realise that was the stat. I mean, 87%. And do you think that's down to the funding, or do you think that's like a core? Because you started a long time before the kind of sports premium funding, things like that were in place.
Well, it's down to one fundamental issue, which I can say now, not being the CEO of Fit for Sport anymore, which is the perception that these activities around PE and sports clubs should only be delivered by qualified teachers, which, is still a government position with the support organisations they work with. And I go back to what I said at the very beginning of this interview. The reason I got into teaching PE was I saw what teachers were delivering on a PE scale, which was so disengaging. They did not want to be there. They hadn't been trained, and it's not changed today. So why the government would sit there and say, actually, who should be delivering these sessions around PE and different sports environments at school should be qualified teachers is still beyond me. It's so incorrect. And I get it should be led by teachers, qualification-wise, but there's no reason why a qualified sports coach cannot deliver side by side with a qualified teacher in environments living PE, because someone's got to have the enthusiasm and engagement and desire to actually want to make a difference with those children. Unfortunately not, James. As a governor myself at a school, a lot of teachers today still do not want to deliver that subject.
It seems like, and just from my own experience, kind of, it seems like teachers' roles are getting harder and harder every day. Like more and more work from different angles, and PE, if it's not your passion, it's going to be hard to be motivated to deliver it like it is, I suppose.
Absolutely, and they you don't blame the teachers. They're not coming to teaching to teach PE or an after school club. They're coming to teach it because they have a passion for teaching. And so some teachers love it, the very sporty teachers, and you get someone, as we know, come in riding the bike and the head says, "Oh, you look sporty, you could be my head of PE." And that's the way it works, still to date. And just 30 years later when I started, it hasn't changed. And for fundamental change in our sector and our industry and our ability to engage all children in this subject matter of called PE, physical education, that needs to change.
Quite right. And in terms of my last kind of focus on the primary PE angle is around childhood obesity and that issue we have at the moment, and it seems to be increasing. And I guess I just want to kind of get your take on the Dean Horridge model of fixing that issue across the nation. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? I do
have some passionate thoughts, and I've done my soapbox around the world with my thoughts on this. So I'll try and keep it brief. But, I go back to my first starting my PE 29 years ago. When I first started, we had quite a few children in this school that were a little bit overweight. 2 years later, we never had one child that was classed as overweight. Forget obese, overweight. Why was that?
That was in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
2 years.
Every single child in that school did a minimum of 1 hour of activity a day. So all my children had to sign up for an after-school club 3 times a week. All had to be active lunchtime. It's not rocket science. The recommendation CMO guidelines, the Chief Medical Officer guidelines, are 1 hour a day of 60 minutes of activity, moderate to vigorous. Now, the definition to moderate to vigorous, let's keep it simple. You're out of breath and you're sweating. Do you know how many children go out for that wonderful time of lunchtime activity in school and sit down and read a book and sit down and have a bag of crisps and sit down and actually do not even move? And we have an environment where we ask children to get up in the morning and have breakfast. Most get driven to school or don't really do much walking. They go into school, they're asked to sit down and listen. They go out to the playground, they're told not to run or use a skipping ropes in case someone gets strangled. And please don't use a football. God forbid someone may get hit. And then they're asked to sit down and have a lunch. And then after school, they do their homework and they sit down and chill out on their games and they go to bed. And we wonder why we have obesity and issues.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. We've got to get the kids moving. We have an hour-a-day recommendation, yet the minimum that schools have to deliver is 2 hours a week. Somehow, James, I don't know about you, my maths has always been quite strong, but 5 hours of recommendation in a school week and only having to deliver 2, you're setting yourself up for failure. So this whole perception around getting kids active needs to be addressed and simplified and mandatory in all schools, that actually your job is to get the children active for for an hour a day. Yes, 30 minutes are in school and 30 minutes are outside of school. But you know what? Schools provide both environments like I did 29 years ago, which was in-school activities, everybody's active, including in class, stand up and do some fun activities. But also after school, every child should have the ability to do an after-school club. And unfortunately, we don't have that in school settings because there's a charge to it. And a lot of parents, like I as a child, could not afford it.
Yeah, and I guess going back to your childhood as well, and probably mine, in terms of society as a whole, certain things that we could do or would do as kids generally can't do. Like you said, people getting dropped off to school. I used to walk to school when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, play out in the street or cut a hole in the tennis court walls and stuff like that. Type of stuff seems to be disappearing, and I don't know whether it's becoming more structured and we've got great coaches working in the community, but the day-to-day, just more active lifestyle seems to be.
Well, there is no fun and there's no time in school, lunch times in many schools. I don't say all schools, I say many schools where the children could just let rip, go wild. If I didn't go running around at half hour my lunchtime at school, I'll be off a roof.
Yeah.
And there's many children that don't, and they then tell them they're naughty, right? These are the children misbehaving. No. They're like a puppy in a cage. You have to let children run and exert that energy, which is built up for being sedentary. And I think the other environment that we have to be very, very careful of is that, homework these days, and I've got 3 young children, but I'm going back a few years when my child was 7 and 8. They used to come home from a whole day at school, getting home at 4:30, and sit there and do 2 hours of homework, which is just insane. Because first of all, some of the statistics around additional learning doesn't really come into play because the children are just whacked by then. What actually is more interesting is how much children learn better when they're inactive. Yeah. And somehow as a sector, we have to find a fine balance to go back to this, this education establishment and say, actually, active children learn better. Active children behave better. Active children sleep better. Active children eat better. I can go on. Yet we have a lot of inactive children around the UK.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads me on. I was going to ask you a question around your own routine, and it does fit with that. So in terms of you're leading a business, and you have done from no employees to 650, I'm assuming you had some type of routine that used to help, certain routines, tactics, things that used to help you with your performance as a business leader. And I'm guessing that included exercise. I'm put myself out there to.
Yes, it's a good call. My wife would tell you very clearly, if I don't exercise every other day, she locks the door and leaves me outside. I'm someone who's always been active. I'm still in the gym 3 times a week. I play very hard tennis, 2 hours without breaks on Friday, and I'm very active with the children, family, and dogs all weekend. If I'm not active myself, I'm just insanely, built up and just cannot sit down. So, not just I'm over, energized. It's part of my routine, and I love it. And my best thinking time, where I'll come up with my best initiatives, including the Ian Wright support group, which we did with the kids, is come from being active, doing an activity, and then going in the sauna for 20 minutes. I just wish someone would invent a pad which doesn't run when you you write something down in the sauna. It ruins all my good ideas. But my best ideas come from being active and then just having a chill out time afterwards.
I know you mentioned Ian right there, and he's, like I said, he's one of my idols. I'm an Arsenal fan, so growing up, he was a bit of an inspiration to me, probably a lot of people my age. How did that come about?
I got a call from these documentary makers, actually. They said they was thinking of doing this program because obviously obesity was big in the news. It hasn't really gone away. And they wanted a celebrity to work with these children. You know, would I, and I've heard about my work I do with the children, would I be the consultant to work with a program? And I said, well, it depends who you're going to get to be the celebrity. And they said, we had a few in mind, and obviously Ian Wright was one of them. And I said, oh, that'd be cool. I said, but what is the program? What is your ethos? What do you want to get out of it? So I met the director of the program, and they said, we've got basically these overweight children. We want Ian to really like be the like sergeant major and really grill them and show the nation how unfit kids are. I says, no, I'm not interested. I said, I'm not interested. If you're going to put these children down, if you're going to put these overweight children, making them feel absolutely crap about themselves for TV purposes, I'm not your man. I said, I would work with Ian and I'll show you how we can change these children's lives, and I'll show you how we can actually get them smiling and feeling good about themselves again, which I don't know if it make good TV, but I'm sure there'll be some moments along the way. And so we end up agreeing some form of in-between. And I met Ian and said, look, just to let you know, this is the way I want to do things. Because he was the face of the program, but you'll probably know, James, I did all the work. and we hit it off very, very quickly, me and Ian. He's a lovely guy, very genuine. One thing I like about him, he says what he wants to say, and that's what I'm like. I don't like greyness. You ask me a question, I'll tell you the answer whether you like it or not. And he is exactly the same mindset. And he was really good. He was, during the World Cup filming, so he was a lot of times not around with the children, but we worked extremely close with the children. And of course, what you then find out being so close to the children is there's more issues in home life than people really first realize, which is probably a lot of the reason why they are feeling so bad about themselves and overeating. So there's a lot more to it, and they could have gone a lot deeper into that, but the directors decided not to. But they were a bunch of kids, and I was engaged with them still many years after the program, trying to support the children, and in fact, even employed a couple of them along the way. Great
story. I mean, and also I bet it couldn't have hurt at the time, raising your profile and helping grow fit for sport as well.
It raised a lot of profile, though we did get the first screening, and the first screening would have to be cut again because there was too much Dean's facing the programs for the director's liking, because Ian wasn't there a lot. So we had to recut a lot of this stuff, and they took me out because it just looked silly, like it was an Ian Wright show. And yeah, every shot you'll see me there because I was with the kids all the time. So that was recut, which was a shame because, I guess I thought I had a face for TV, but maybe it's radio.
Yeah, maybe.
But that was fine. I wasn't really precious about being on the TV, and it did give me a high-profile image, I guess, working with Ian and the team. But it really showed, I guess, the seriousness of the over-obese issue that we had, which was more importantly for me to get the nation realising we've got to do something about it.
Definitely. Just moving back to business, I know I'm really interested to hear about the kind of SAS concepts, and I'm guessing this is something you've developed growing Fit for Sport, and I'm assuming you're going to be implementing in the new venture as well. But could you just talk us through that a little bit? I think our listeners will be, maybe even myself might be stealing that one and implementing it myself.
It's almost what I started from day one. When I made a decision to start a business, and I did, like everybody does, did a bit of research and look what's out there. Of course, there was no real sector out there that I could learn from. And you had people saying, you've got to write a business plan, you've got to do this, and you strategize here, and da-da-da. And I spent 6 months doing all these papers and business plans, and they were pretty much dead after 4 months because the business had changed so much. And I did them again and again, and it took me about a year to realize, why am I overcomplicating this? Why am I really overcomplicating this? So I came up with, including the way I employed staff, and we trained staff, textbook style. Well, no, our staff are really visual and hands-on. And they learn from watching someone like myself at that time, engage the children in those environments. So I came up with this simple, achievable, sustainable approach. There were so many things that I was doing at the early stages that wasn't simple, wasn't achievable for a lot of people, and certainly wasn't sustainable. And I just thought, what a waste of time that was, that period of time, that month or 2 weeks or whatever it was, doing what we've just done, and yet not many people can achieve it, and we're not using it now. So the SAS has stayed with me through life, and actually what I do is I use it in my personal life as well. Anything I do with business or personal or my home with kids, I always think, is that simple? Is that achievable? And is that sustainable? And if it falls into those three categories, I'm all in. If it doesn't, it's time to rethink.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think starting businesses and trying to grow and want to be seen as professional, you might tend to overthink things a little bit.
Oh, so much. And you know what? You listen to a lot of people, which is good. You know, you learn from people, but a lot of the times you listen to too many people.
Yeah.
And there's too many options, and it becomes so complicated, never achievable, and certainly, not simple. And that always leads to it's not sustainable. So, my advice is those three things are fundamental to any decisions you're going to make, certainly in business.
And what would you say in terms of running a successful business at the scale you were at as well, or getting to that scale? What would you say the keys would be? I know you touched on you building that team originally. Yeah. Was that original team, are any of those guys still in the company? And
yeah.
All that journey with you? And I guess that's down to your values, is it?
Yeah, I've had people working with me for, God, so many years. We've got people retiring now, which is scary. So I've had people working with me for over 20 years, which is crazy to think that, you stay in employment these days for over 2. And in fact, my new business, I've taken a couple of staff who have come with me, that have been with me 16, 18 years. And I think, it's really important. As I said, my way of managing my business has always been open and transparent. My staff know that they can trust me. If they ask me a question, they've always got to be prepared to, listen to the answer, because it will be a truthful answer. It'll be something that I don't like hiding behind a lie. So like it or not, that's what the answer is. So, you gain a lot of respect for that. And I think in building a business, you have to have an understanding of where you want to be in a short, medium, and long term. Now, the long-term one for me is really something that you don't spend too much time on, because the world, as we know, who knew COVID was coming in, right? Yeah. There'll be something else in the next 5-10 years, no doubt. So the long-term vision is always something you have, but to drive that with your ethos of the team is something that people don't really get. So that short term, for me, is all about ownership and buy-in. So it's very easy, you see, when I walk into the office and I see a piece of paper, people say, well, why did you pick that up? You're the CEO, you're the owner, you're the founder. Yeah. And I've always had a philosophy, actually, I've never asked many of my staff to do anything that I wouldn't do. And any good leader, in my view, leads by example. Whether that's to stay at 7 o'clock because the kid's not turned up, it doesn't matter. So you get a lot of respect and buy-in. And yes, money plays a part in paying people's salary, but actually, if you get people working for the cause and working for the belief and working for someone that actually would do anything they are going to ask you to do, it makes a big, big point of positioning to get buy-in. And ownership is key. It's very easy for people to say, it's not my job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
very
the thing
easy.
Is, I mean, one thing that's coming across, and it's probably across the industry as well, is that the mission, I guess, in terms of someone getting up and coming to work, the mission of the company, what you're trying to achieve is positive, right? It's getting kids active and helping them live a healthier life, which is probably easy to get behind. So with that combined with your leadership, obviously you can see why people would follow you and your goals for so long.
Unfortunately, you'll probably know as well as I do that, and a lot of your listeners who potentially have businesses, there's a lot of people who think working with children is so easy and so fun. Wow, kicking the ball around? That's great. And I get paid for it. Amazing. You don't know how many people have come into my organizations with the most qualified people in the world. We've got all different sports, and you put them in front of a child from 7:30 to 5 o'clock or 3:30, and they say, wow, this is not for me. You have to have a passion. You have to have a desire. You have to have a belief that you're making a difference, and you sleep well at night knowing that you potentially change a child's life for the better, to really understand this industry and thrive in it. Working with children all day, I tell you now, is not easy. It's hard work. When the rain is there, when the cold is outside, and you got your hat on and the gloves on, and the kids are not listening, and it's hard work. But you know what? You got to, at the end of the day, smile about it and say, well, at least I've made a difference to Johnny, who's for the first time, engaged in the sport today, for example.
I think everyone's had a bit of an insight into that during lockdown, doing all the homeschooling thing and all that angle. So one thing I'm really interested in is in 29 years in Fit for Sport, and then you had earlier this year, was it March, just before, I don't know if it was March early this year when you stepped down?
Yeah,
as
exactly.
As active CEO, day-to-day operation. How was that for you? I guess like you spent all those years building a business. I don't know, you're still involved, but how was it? Was it time to do it? Or
yeah, I'm still a director of JAG, which is Junior Adventure Group, which is the big, I guess, mothership from Australia and then Singapore and New Zealand and Ireland, now the UK, and there's a lot of plans to grow. And they approached us, and I've always been approached by various groups looking to get into the sector, because it is an exciting sector. It's always going to be kids, right? There's always going to be kids. There's always going to be a need for additional childcare or sports for those children. So the sector is flooded with small operators, and I've been approached several times. And I think, I came up to 50 last August, and I've always had my vision, my dream at 50 to be in a position where I didn't need to worry for a while, let's just say. And I think I came to that, 50 bracket, and it was time to engage in conversation. And we was approached by this group, and we sold back in October last year. And I remained on the board at strategic level, trying to, steer the new group in the UK to the next phase of events. So I'm very passionate still that I make a difference. But it was time for me to let go of the reins and let someone take it to the next level. I'm very open and transparent to say I took it to a period of time and a point in time where it has potential to go even further. And I know my limitations. I know where my strengths lie, and it wasn't to take this business to that phase, certainly on a global scale. So it was a very easily decision for me, though hard on the heartstrings, of course.
Yeah, that's what I think. And so from that, you've launched the new venture, and I guess going back to startup phase again. So back to, I don't know, is it 100-hour work weeks and stuff again now? Yeah. So you got the social book company. So do you want to fill us in on the kind of?
Yeah. So it's always a good time, as I said, to start a business during lockdown. Yeah. But I was approached by my co-founder of this venture, and we discussed, and he came with the idea of these sort of online books and resources to support children. And I thought about it for a period of time. I said, actually, I think we could turn this into a business. And so it's called the Social Book Club. And in essence, it's an online library educating children on the difficulties they face in the world. So very much still supporting children and young children. And what we do, we create, we write and we illustrate books ourselves, as well as having authors around the world in subject matter that supports the PHSE in school. But more importantly for me, topics that children find very stressful and cause anxiety in the world we live in today, like bullying, like COVID, life after COVID, and books like that. And there's a lot of subjects that parents find difficult to talk to children, but also school find it difficult to talk to children. There's books on recycling. James, we think a 7-year-old knows what recycling is about. Well, a lot of them actually think it's a blue box you open and put plastic in. But there's a lot more to it, than that. And we illustrate the books in a child-centric world where it goes through the story of why we actually recycle. And it's got a turtle in there, and obviously what happens to the turtle and what could happen to the turtle if we don't recycle. And kids get it. So it's really educating the children in and around that space, as well as virtual workshops for schools, supporting them on those difficult subjects. So very passionate, very, very difficult time to start a business. We've got some investment up front, which has helped us. And who knows, it could be a global sensation because it can work in any country that speaks the English language.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be successful. In terms of just digging a little bit deeper into the service, you said it was online books. Is that kind of tablet? Can people just download? How do they access that?
Yeah, good question. So it's a subscription-based model. So schools will sign up to get all access to up to 200 books that they use as part of their learning for the children. A parent can sign up for $7.99 a month and have access to, again, the same books and same resources that they could support the children through home learning. So it's a very low-end sort of subscription-based model. So we're looking for also partners. So if any of your listeners have ability to a database with parents, I think this is a great way of supporting their parents, which it is. We're launching next week with Waitrose as our first partner, and we're talking to Virgin and Sky. So we're hoping to move those forward, all supporting this, because it's great employee benefit for one, because they've got parents with children, but also it's a great initiative to broaden out to, I guess, people's databases. And our model is very simple. If you sign up someone tomorrow for $7.99, James, you get £2 of that $7.99 per month. So for a partner supporting this sort of initiative, it's a good revenue stream if you have a big database.
100%, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be interested in, obviously, with the work they're doing in the community and with families. So if we wanted to set that up, how do they contact you for that, or is it your team, or do they hit your website?
Go to thesocialbookclub.com. You'll see the website. You can have a look. Our contact details are there. I'm more than happy for your readers and listeners to get my details and talk to me direct about opportunities, or even just some questions following this interview now. I'm always open for supporting people in the sector. So please have that as an option.
Reach out. No, fantastic. Just to finish off, I've got one question that hopefully you'll enjoy. It's kind of looking back, and it's when you started the business. I know it's 91. I don't know prior into your age, but at that time, I'm guessing late 20s maybe, you were, if you had the opportunity to go back and speak to yourself then, is there one piece of advice you'd give yourself at that age, or when you, let's say, mid-20s, when you're setting out to start the business? What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Good question. I'm a very determined person, and a lot of times, I guess the best bosses in the world actually absorb a lot of the good work that the team do around them. And I think that what I did on the early stages was try and take in too much advice and not be clear about my strategy and where I wanted to be. And that sort of slowed me down many years at the early stages by just trying to please other people, including building up a board and a set of senior team. But if you have a vision, if you have belief, as a leader, you have to strive to achieve that. And actually what I found over time, very early stages, but people will follow you if they believe in you. So those advice and those support mechanisms are great, but you as a leader have to have the belief and the desire and understanding and a clear message to anybody that you want as part of that team and journey.
Thanks for that, Dean. I really appreciate your last answer there. I think we get a lot of insight from that. And thanks for your time today. I'll wrap up there, but hopefully next time I see, maybe we could do it in person and take me on the tennis court and show me how to play.
Definitely. I won't let you win, that's for sure.
I'll start training now.
Great to speak to you, James.
You too, Dean. Thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sports.